and I'm wearing my appropriate. There's only two of these on the planet because this is the subject we're really talking about, which, as you mentioned, our potential guest here, Leah, knows all about. This is Clover billboards are humane washing. So for people who aren't familiar with that term, it's the equivalent of greenwashing when you make things that seem ecological or green for short when they're not. So you see the Clover billboards that Schuyler was getting into with the happy fields and the smiling cows, and nothing could be further from the truth. The reality is a really grim one, which is why it's sort of like doing happy billboards of Auschwitz camps for people of the Jewish persuasion in World War II, and showing them smiling, and they got, hey, 3 hots in a cot. What's the problem? We treat them nice. It's kind of that degree of monstrousness. So it sets off, well, probably Skyward more than anyone, but me too.
Well, what sets me off is the human response, because someone could make an argument that yes, something can be further from the truth because it gets worse. we have the factory farms. It does get worse. But of course, one of the things that resonates with me with Point Reyes is that Point Reyes is supposed to be the best of the best. Point Reyes is supposed to be an example of how good things can be. And even when you're promoting the dairies of Point Reyes, they still have to lie. And I recall when The Shame of Point Reyes came out, Loudmouth Lunny, which I really think is a great nickname for him. That guy is always crying. He was the first one to say, oh, you didn't represent the ranchers. This is just one side of it. Like, no, I went out and I filmed the ranches at the nicest time of year. This is what they look like. This is as good as it gets.
As we said before, though, the conditioning is so strong. I mean, when I had, because I'm not from California originally, I didn't move out here till I was in 35. And then it was actually this time of year, just about March. And I was photographing skaters inline skaters as a pro photographer for magazines and stuff. And I would be like, wow, this is so beautiful. I can go over to Berkeley, up in the hills, and there's all these green rolling hills. And I thought that was the natural landscape of California. I didn't know. And oddly enough, even people who live here think that that's the natural landscape when they don't realize those green rolling hills that make it look like Ireland is actually, well, you go on about this in your film. You're the one that taught me, probably more than anyone. The lessons have deepened since, but when I saw your film in 2019, I guess it was, is that, I don't know, I lose track of time here, but that's all European grasses. There are 98% European imports to feed the European imported animals. So it's just, it is an invasive species, if anything, that we exploit for money and totally, deforest the hills and trample, as we know at Point Reyes and the Elk Reserve is the one classic example we're always talking about here. Just trample the native vegetation and bring in the European grasses, which become quote unquote flammable. And then you have to bring in the cows to fix the problem created by the cows, and on it goes.
Well, supposedly fix the problem. They actually perpetuate the problem.
Thank you. Excellent. Good catch. You see, there's the teamwork, the good cop, bad cop teamwork we're talking about. So you asked me about the billboards. I was just, when I found out about Clover billboards and became more, or I've seen them for years here in California for decades. It's an old, successful campaign. And people are brainwashed about it. They just don't know. They see a happy cow, and as you say, it's the best of the best. I mean, not this Thursday, 9 days, in 2 Thursdays, I'm giving a talk with 2 other folks in the Point Reyes Coalition to the Marin Coalition, sort of like the Commonwealth Club of San Francisco, very kindly organized us to talk about what's going on. And in my 3 of us are going to speak for 10 minutes. In my 10 minutes, I'm going to reach out to a crowd of older folks. The audience skews older, and try to explain to them just this very topic. And I'm betwixt and between about how to do it, because people who've lived here for 50 years and love the organic Strauss dairy and Clover dairies, it's really hard to penetrate the brain fog. The conditioning is so strong. You start bad mouthing Strauss, and they're like, what do you mean? This, like, Jesus, stop it. These are this good, small, local, historic, hardworking, organic, loving, all this stuff. And words, it's tough to battle it with just words when it's 20 years of pictures and advertising you're fighting, or 50 years.
It's interesting for the eggs to come into the picture, because last time I was driving through Sonoma, I went past an old hatchery. They call it a hatchery. and it looked like a factory farm to me. And it was celebrated. I'm like, this is massive. It's a massive enclosure. There's no sunlight comes in. And I'm like, this is what people think is good. It's like, okay, produce babies as fast as you can, let them live in darkness and confusion for a little bit, and chop up the babies, take the eggs, mass produce them, and rinse and repeat. And like, my God.
It's tricky too. When I drive to Point Reyes, I pass Nicasio Reservoir. I
Oh,
assume
yeah.
you know where that is on the way.
Yes, I remember when the ranches drained Nicasio Reservoir to feed the livestock.
Only when they need it. Only when there's a drought do they drain the water table. People don't realize that, people are worried about taking shorter showers and not washing their car and taking out the grass in their lawns, and that's all good to do, sure. But the number one, I need to get these statistics from Mohan or so one of these statistics guy who's good at digging into it. But I know that in general, more gallons of water are used by, well, specifically cow businesses, dairy, by cow operations, all residential use. So if you care about drought and water consumption in Northern California, stop eating dairy products and beef products. That's pure and simple.
McClure was using 200,000 gallons a day. And I remember driving through Point Reyes Station with all these signs, conserve water, conserve water.
Wow, thank you.
As they go out and buy the cheeseburgers from McClure.
Isn't it something? Thank you for that stat. I didn't know that. And that was when he was at full capacity with the dairy, which he's now begged off of down to beef cows for the last year of his existence there. But isn't it, don't cows drink like 30 or 40 gallons of water per day per cow, something like that?
Correct. And then there's the water used for the crops for the additional feed, in addition to watering the fields that grow the invasive grasses to feed them. And then they were actually proud of this. There's the water, precious, limited resource that we have, used to spray the fecal matter out of the giant loafing barns.
To hose down, to clean up. It's basically processing. We got to clean all the poop.
I mean, honestly, when you're out there watching wildlife die of thirst, and then you see water being used to spray feces off of the floor of a horrific industry, you understand why I've become a little, shall we say, bitter?
Well, I don't know if we want to go that far, Skylar. How about playful? You remind me of the Seinfeld bit during the drought, which was what, 2020, right? And Californians were freaking out in San Francisco, San Francisco. Oh no, water, 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 water. And, Hetch Hetchy is being lowered and drained, and Mono Lake and all this stuff. And Seinfeld, God bless him, was standing somewhere in his Long Island home with a garden hose, running it full bore and just spilling it out onto the driveway, going, look, California, water, lots of water. Like, because there's no problem there. Other side of the country, different world.
Hey, Karen said that she thought you made these images, and Karen, Jack has altered some of them, but and she called me Wolfie. I forgot how did I get that nickname from a previous episode?
I was wondering who she's talking to. I'm with you, Wolfie.
I thought I might be confused, but she also has driven past these places, and she says they just look like warehouses.
Well, that's the whole the DXC. God bless them. I really like that group. They're young people and they're aggressive and not afraid to be activists for animals and animal rights and such. But they did the Measure J campaign, and for me, I had problems with that because it was making a distinction between factory farms and small farms. And I understand it was a political strategy, which is to say you can't get it passed if you're against all farming. It's all animal agriculture. It's too big a leap. So you say we just want to shut down the factories, which would have crippled the industry in Petaluma and Sonoma County. So that's great, but it just also feeds into the. Did I talk about humane washing? Whoopsie. Which is,
now, how did you get that shirt?
Well, I made the design in Photoshop and I printed it on a T-shirt.
Wow.
Have you read it?
I'm trying.
Do you love animals? Do you eat meat, eggs, and dairy from cows, chickens, and pigs who were confined, mutilated, forcibly impregnated, and killed on small, local, organic, grass-fed, free-range, family-owned regenerative farms?
We got to get the people from Elwood's dog food on here.
Molly would be great to. Oh God, I've never spoken to her, but I'm impressed with her. She's a former, or maybe still, copywriter like I was. So love her mind, and the sarcasm is so thick you can cut it with a butter knife, or spread it with a butter knife.
Sledge reminds us that he grew up in California in Pleasanton. I actually have been to Pleasanton. Jack, have you been to Pleasanton?
No, I literally don't even. I can't even picture where that is on a map. Is it South Bay or East?
East. It's like
Walnut Creekish.
kind of. It's like between Fremont and Walnut Creek, or
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, and Karen. Well, Karen, we should have you on. You're a smart one. I'm in DXC, she says, and we want to end factory farming in California. Well, sure, but the thing is, the complaint I have, or my complaint. I mean, again, I don't criticize other sincere activists, and DXC is filled with sincere activists. So God bless them. You know, everyone does different stuff, and that we don't always agree on strategy. And I'm a big. It's fine. We don't have to. Democracy is messy as it should be, as opposed to controlled like an autocracy, where everybody does what they told or they're killed. But to say end factory farming, that creates the impression, which the industry is all too happy to capitalize on, that small farms are okay. It's only the factories that are the problem. But without factories, you couldn't meet demand. Factory farming came into existence because of market demand, consumer demand. People eat this stuff, so you have to industrialize it to make it more efficient. In other words, if it was just Strauss and I don't know, whatever little brands of organic so-called small farms, maybe 1,000 animals rather than 5,000 or 500 animals, it doesn't meet demand. People are eating so much of this stuff, beef and dairy products. You have to make a factory, otherwise you can't keep up with the number of people who want to eat it.
But to bring it back to today's show,
please.
What I think is disturbing is that these small farms, depending on your perspective, look like factories. Even, you know, it's like all you need to see is the label that says it's from a small family farm. Have you gone and looked at the farm? Have you seen what happens at that farm? Do you know what the size of the farm is? Do you know who those farms are operating with, who they're partnered with, who they're taking? I mean, really, they're just putting a little bit of a drop into the bigger bucket that these factory farms are also contributing to, and then it all gets processed. But you can feel better that yours came from a place that looks supposedly like the side of this truck that Leah took a picture of. And I have a bunch of pictures like this. Sorry, absolutely nothing that you're seeing there is true. I'm sorry.
Meaning the beautiful rows of crops and the green grass, and of course, smiling cows. Oh God. I mean, the cows sometimes are huddled under the trees to stay out of the heat. Wow. So this is, folks, that is not a real billboard. I won't even read it because we'll be banned off YouTube. So,
you mean this one?
Yeah, that's kind of a strong one, but I mean, it's not inaccurate. But
well, take it down. I won't mention who made it.
I made it, and I'm proud of it. And please show it. That's fine. That's the real thing. See the difference? You're beautiful. You're going back and forth there between. That's the advertising, and then more the reality. Although again, even with the R word there, I don't know what the limitations are. I've been kind of made paranoid about saying nasty words, even if they're true words on YouTube that will be censored.
Isn't that funny?
Look at that. Look at that. Actually, show that swimming pool one. God, Skyler. Anyway, it doesn't. I'm sorry. There you go. That's an actual. So I created this image instead of Amazing Grays. I put them on the real landscape. That's an actual photograph of that's Kehoe's land. That's what it looks like at Point Reyes. That's the actual land and an actual cow and an actual background. The foreground cow is put in there, but those animals are all for real on that land. I mean, it's just, there's the reality, folks.
Anybody see a stark difference between that and the billboard?
Right. And even you can see in the hills in the background, there's a little bit of green grass in the background there, but in the foreground where the cows are, it's just trampled to dirt.
Let's stay on the green grass part for a minute. How many people are desperate enough to be like, look, it's not completely dead, therefore it's good? I mean, that's some serious desperation level to say, oh, look, it's not 100% dead. And this is like in the winter when things should be lush, and it's not even native grass, for the love of God. And man, can anyone see the udder on that poor cow? Did anyone notice the details of the udder on that cow?
how swollen that poor mother animal is with milk.
And I'm noticing that there is a cluster of bull thistle in front. I doubt if people on the web can see that detail. I don't know if you knew that, Jack, but that is bull thistle, also invasive, doesn't benefit anything. Even the cows don't like it. And yet this type of invasive thistle always shows up in pastures. And the
Well,
rest of it's just dead. Look at that.
One of our regular caller and a resident born and bred in Petaluma, Ray Cooper, is in Arizona right now, but he just wrote in, I used to drive a truck for these guys, meaning for Clover.
Oh my God. I didn't know that.
You know, Ray, like me, is in his 50s. I'm in my 60s, actually. But, you know, he lived in the town and is surrounded by, you know, nice people who happen to be in this business. And poor Ray woke up, is now vegan, and living surrounded by people who haven't woken up, that think all of this is just fine and don't want to look at the truth.
That's in Point Reyes National Seashore, people. It's not just in Marin. It's in a biodiversity hotspot in California that the government wanted to save because of how beautiful it was. And this is the best of dairies in a national seashore.
And Karen Leese and Ray Cooper, who are both educated, both, they say they notice the udder right away. And most people wouldn't. They have no idea. You have to point it out and then they'll see it, which is how I was when you pointed out that the hills are, you know, basically, there you go, monoculture golf course. That is not a natural landscape for California. People don't know that until you pointed it out. I didn't know it either, Skylar.
Well, and it took me a minute too. I've said in a previous show, I tried to relate with the people back home. I was like, hey, look, California's kind of like you. We've got barns and we've got, you know, we just have the rolling hills. And
Skylar, go with this. I'd love to hear your comments. Support your local cow, Skylar. What do you think? Are you supporting your local cow by buying her milk?
Just so and just so everyone knows, this is a real ad. This is not an altered ad, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Take a breath, take your time. I want Skylar Thomas, the brilliant filmmaker, to go and support your local cow.
But this is not even one of their more offensive ads, and yet you bring up a great point. Support your local cow. People, if you don't buy this milk, you're not supporting that cow. What's the implication?
Cows need to be milked? Cows need to be milked by humans?
That or some form of abuse or misfortune will take place to these cows if you don't continue to buy this product, I guess.
It's I mean, I could talk 20 minutes, you know, kind of pseudo intellectually about cows need support from humans via capitalism by purchasing a product because, you know, cows need money. I mean, it's just the projection of our human insanity onto an animal species while mutilating the animal and confining the animal and abusing the animal and forcibly impregnating the animal and taking her babies away. That's support. I mean, it's Orwellian to the extent that which she's happy and smiling. All that's fine. And of course, ignored and doesn't even exist, but it does.
How about the word organic, which kind of bugs me because this is what organic looks like, ladies and gentlemen.
And Stephen from I love saying Stephen from Switzerland via Brooklyn says maybe cows need the work.
Well, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of people who accuse vegans of being responsible for farm animals getting killed. And it's like, well, now that nobody's eating them, they have to be killed. Like, do I even have to explain how stupid that statement is? Like, the only reason these animals exist is to be killed. They're going to be killed. These aren't household pets. These aren't wildlife. They are commodities that are destroying the planet so they can get big enough for you to continue to consume them and continue to live your stationary diabetes-ridden, obese life.
And to put it without our humor / sarcasm, Susan Kirks is just commenting it from Petaluma, says that the mother cows suffer so much. And that's, you know, without Susan is a gentle woman, vegan, who is surrounded by cow country and hyper masculine abusers of animals. And that's normal. So she's the freak, the outcast, the black sheep of Sonoma County. It's tough stuff to live around it. I even when I visit Ray Cooper up in Petaluma, he's housing the humane washing machine right now that I built out of a washing machine, and just driving up and seeing it. Well, you know this guy, or when you drive through this territory or live in it, it's difficult because you know the truth, and yet you're surrounded by people who are just in an Orwellian fog of not knowing, of denial.
You know what I didn't expect at the first screening of The Shame of Point Reyes was how many people stood up and shared stories about how their health problems went away when they removed dairy from their lives. And I was like, I didn't even make this film for people to like try and get healthier. I just said, are you even looking at what's in front of you? And Ray Cooper is talking about, hey, look at me. One of the perks of that working for that truck was that I could eat all this dairy. Yeah, and guess what happens? He was sick. Ray Cooper had a show called Food is Energy. And Ray, I'm wondering if part of the inspiration for that title is the fact that you're like, wow, I changed my diet and I got healthy. What you put in your body matters. It's not about eating whatever you want and then going to the pharmacy to combat all the problems that you just put inside of your body.
Well, what is that expression? Was it Hippocrates? It's let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food. Which is, if you eat properly, you'll have far, far, far fewer health problems. And the epidemic of, sorry, I got to go there, health problems in this country that Bobby Kennedy Jr. is going to fix without, of course, bad mouthing dairy products and processed meat products. Instead, he's going to go at, I guess, polio vaccine. Don't let me get me started, but I so want to.
Sledge sent a greeting to Ray Cooper. Karen let us know that Clover is 70% owned by Alpina, a Colombian corporation. Interesting.
Didn't know that. Who wrote that?
Karen.
Oh, Karen. I don't know that I've ever spoken with Karen Lease. I know a few Karens, so I get confused, but she says, face pink tears. Dairy is so unhealthy for humans.
And look, I can't say that I am sure I've ever seen a cow smile, but they sure as I guarantee you, I've never seen a cow look like this. All their teeth showing. Why do you have to become absurd like this?
Well, because it sells product, I guess, and it entertains the kids, and then it creates a fog of lie. By the way, Ray wrote also, just to gild the lily here, when I dropped dairy, meaning you stopped eating dairy products, it was like getting shot out of a rocket. Going vegan brought me back to high school energy levels. That's quite a testimonial. Yeah. Meaning you don't need to eat dairy products, and he felt better when he stopped.
No, it's true. It's true. And I think I already shared on here that I stopped buying milk just because it was expensive and it spoiled before I would use it when I was in my 20s. And then if I would go back and there'd be an occasion to consume a bunch of dairy at some event, guess what? I had to shit it all out messily because my body was like, what are you doing? I thought we were done with this.
You have any video? Oh, it's Corinne. Corinne rhymes with Marin. Okay, I know Corinne, NNE, but not Karin. Anyway, thank you. With a name like Geshite, I make the effort.
I think the most upsetting thing to me is the babies being included in these pictures. I mean, dairy is based on separating mothers from babies, and yet here we have mothers and babies, and they're drinking the milk together communally out of a pitcher and glasses. This is freaking weird, people. This is weird.
I am currently rereading, because I haven't read it in, I don't know, 20 or 30 years, a little book by a guy named Eric Blair. His pen name is George Orwell, and he wrote a book called 1984, and it is chilling right now to read that in 2025 America. Because the goal, I mean, this has all been said before, but it bears repeating. It's the topic du jour, more so than even just the big issue of dairy and animal agriculture, although that's a huge issue. But you dismantle the media, you tell people what to think, and they have nowhere else to go. You ban books and movies. You're always being watched, by by Alexa and the other self-monitoring systems and having tracking devices. And you create an autocracy or totalitarian in that case regime. And then it's very different from the democracy we sort of kind of had, which was corrupted by capitalism and corporatocracy. And we're kind of in the first fledgling steps of head in that direction right now.
Well, before you came on, I asked our Trump viewer to list what he liked about Trump, and he said accountability. And it's just interesting. That's a draft dodging tax evader being praised for accountability. How many failed businesses does he have? Anyway, but yeah, the Orwellian part is more disturbing to me than the rest of his personal issues. Let's go back to this photo, because there are two things in there that are actually accurate about California, and that's the hay bales. And I'm guessing back behind that text is a vineyard, wineries.
Oh boy! Oh boy! Oh boy!
Sorry, everybody. Those wineries are bad news. And the only thing green that you will see in Sonoma in the summer are the vineyards, while everything else is dead and dry, because between the ranches and the vineyards, nothing else is getting water.
Yeah, we should do a whole separate show on vineyards, and I need to do more research. I know they take a huge amount of water, and it's to produce a luxury product. And everybody I know is a wine drinker. I'm the freak exception that I don't drink wine, but produced in California, it's not the climate to do it in. Don't get me started, and it's money. And Marty Knudsen throws in another thing we've touched on before, but is appropriate for the dairy industry. Bird flu will likely impact the dairy industry to a large degree, and hopefully it'll change consumer behavior. It might. People won't eat it. They won't stop eating it for the right reason, but they'll stop because they don't want to get sick, which will take it some reason.
Well, last week I read briefly that article that they already found cases of bird flu being transferred with the replacement dairy that's being fed to the cows. So
I don't know if we want to have Leah on or ask her on if she's even available. I didn't communicate with Leah this morning, but she knows a lot about it. She's been writing about bird flu in her role as farmed animal campaigner for In Defense of Animals.
I've put the call-in link a couple of times. So if you're listening, just click that link. And anyone, we'll play with it. We'll entertain some calls here and there. Now, we should get through the slides that Jack chose for today. We will do a follow-up show, because what isn't on here is the one where they show Columbus arriving and the Native Americans on the shore are cows.
Wow.
We have to do that one in the future.
God, I don't think I've seen that one. I mean, you asked me where I got these and how did I choose. I just went on the internet and searched and grabbed anything I could find, and then decided which ones I could do a clever spoof of, or a potentially clever spoof of. Steve Axelrod will appreciate that. It's we all grew up in New York with Mad Magazine as kids in the 1960s and 70s, which was doing parodies of ads. So it was just more of that. It's so twisted. And the Vulcan, who's, live long and prosper, a man of peace, is, torturing chickens, I guess. Anyway, oh God, a whole chicken conversation too. That's another thing. It's really bizarre. It's just sort of anything goes. Just make up the most absurd thing and put it out there. And sadly, it's effective to get people to not realizing they're torturing animals when they eat animal products.
I can see the words pasture raised on there. No. Go ahead. Everyone, I'm going to put the burden of proof on the people that say that we're lying. Please go and take some heartwarming footage of the pasture-raised chickens, because I've taken footage of what I see in Marin County and Sonoma, and it isn't this.
Well, it's even trickier and more sick and worse than that, Skylar, in that pasture-raised, which is now we're seeing on packages all over the place, like free range, there's no legal requirement for it. And there's little or pretty much zero enforcement of when they're in pasture, what a pasture looks like.
Let's remember that that's a pasture now, people. So if the chickens got out for 5 minutes a day, that's what they went into.
Well, I even learned that free range means they can live in a giant shed, windowless shed, and they just have a little opening, which is, 2 foot by 2 foot, where the chicken could go out if it wanted to, but might ever go. It might never go out, and that's considered pasture raised.
You mean if its legs still worked? You mean if the legs that won't support its artificially inflated body, it can look at an opening that it physically can't even get to because of what has been done to it by the loving farmers who are producing as many miserable animals as possible at as fast a rate as possible to increase their profit margins. And these are what we call Christians that love animals.
You're probably the right. I don't know anybody else I could talk to. Maybe one person I can think of, but you, Skylar, I could say suggesting a topic for a show, which is going to be the topic of it. That's funny. I proposed this to an activist and I haven't heard back because it was a bridge too far for this committed, fantastic, and inspirational vegan activist. But I wanted to give a talk called, and I was even careful about how I phrased this, but I said, don't call it an animal holocaust, parenthesis, even though it is. Like
right.
Animal holocaust, like, no, don't bring the whole Jewish thing and don't compare it to a Holocaust. Why would you say that? It sets people off to the side with arguing about, Jewish issues and the Holocaust and Jews were the only ones that died and all this stuff. It's too loaded. And at first I bought that, and then I watched a speech by an inspirational vegan activist who gave a speech 10 years ago named Gary Yourofsky. And he turned me around on that one. He said, no, it's completely appropriate. And in fact, I now take it further, as I like to do, and say it's actually, you're right. It's not a fair comparison to compare what we do to animals to the Holocaust because
what we do is way worse.
Because, thank you, Skylar. Oh, exactly. Because what we do to animals is far worse than what was done to the Jews in the Holocaust.
You know what I discovered?
Let that sink in for people. Like, what? Justify that. But I'll pause. Go.
Well, Skylar. Within a couple more years, the Holocaust will be erased from history, and it was only crazy people like us that pretended that it even existed.
That's 1984.
Yeah, it's happening, and people are clapping for it.
Yeah. Well, there was no, there was no insurrection. It was a peaceful protest at the Capitol. I mean, it's really fast. May you live in interesting times, as the saying goes. And yes, Gary rocks Kareen. I have trouble saying your name that way because I'll work on it.
So Sledge says wine is a total waste, and I've got to tell you, I enjoyed all these things together. Like cheese was one of the last things that went because I wanted to be able to have wine and cheese and prosciutto and prosciutto.
Oh God. Oh God. And I want to just step back for 1 second, do an overview. So it's people who tune in that aren't our regulars and aren't on board with us, and I hope some people do get to see these recordings and listen to what we're suggesting. It's like, oh, these guys, these vegans, or they're always going on about dairy. What's the problem with dairy? I'm just having a little milk. All of this is wrapped up in 3 giant issues. One is the climate crisis, the heating planetary environment we're living in due to animal agriculture in large part, a greater driver of it than fossil fuels. Of course, fossil fuels are also part of the animal killing, raising, eating industry. So environmental devastation, the horrific, unspeakable, no one wants to see it, cruelty of the industry, in addition. And then, you don't need it for your health either. I mean, I could get away with eating animal products. I was sort of very active and healthy and an athlete and stuff, and it didn't really matter, although I felt cleaner and lighter and better when I didn't eat them. But for those 3 reasons, and then the final reasons for me being an ex-advertising guy and a wise ass out of New York is, don't lie to me. Don't you friggin' try to con me to get me to buy your products, which is what we're talking about here with the Clover billboards. But for all those reasons, this is why I suspect Skyward, but he'll speak for himself, thank you, go at this topic again and again and again. There is no more important topic. I mean, there's no more important topic.
It's funny that I feel so tempted to bypass topics such as cruelty and planetary destruction because people don't want to talk about that. And the one that maybe I could get them to actually be upset about is the fact that they're being lied to. I'm like, why do you Why do these guys feel the need to advertise with false information? And why are you okay with it? I mean, that's simple enough. Let's go back to this slide, and it talks about love. What the hell? Where does love come into the picture here? Tell me, let me scroll backward. And the word down at the bottom right is love, and you see hearts all over. I don't know who the dairy cow is going to shoot with Cupid's arrow, but really, can we have some people explain where love comes into the picture in dairy?
Clover, the only milk with love. That's where do you? I think I changed that one. I have a version of that where it says Clover, not the only milk with abuse. I think that's what I did, but I didn't play with the graphics, so I'm not sure it's in the mix I sent you.
Oh, I think it is.
Yeah.
I just want to give a minute for anyone to think about that. Like, taking babies from their mothers is loving. Depriving a mother of a baby is loving. Not letting a baby experience what it's like to nurse, or the mother to experience what it's like to be nursed upon. Let me guess. It's love because these prisoners are fed. Well, why are they fed? So they can reach a size to slaughter them as quickly as possible for profit. I mean, can you imagine, Jack, if I took your child and fattened your child up so I could sell your child's flesh, and I said, yeah, but I fed that child out of love?
It's well, the word I keep saying repeatedly ad nauseum is Orwellian, and yeah, Stephen says, it's as I'm reading last night, a few pages before I go off to slumber, I read some Orwell. The thought police and the Ministry of Truth, and there are thought crimes. You can be prosecuted for thinking certain things if it's shown on your face, and then you're brought in for questioning. Oh, there it is, Clover, not the only milk with abuse. Yeah, well, all milks have abuse. It's inherent, and that's including, just for anybody who's listening in that doesn't know, those little cows out in the field are abused, and then, of course, they're killed young, sent off to big industrial slaughterhouses. They're not lovingly killed in the field with a loving butcher knife to the throat. It's not even that way. So it's inherently abusive. There's no way around it. Torture and abuse and a young death. Love equals profit. Love of money.
And I saw Paula in the chats. Welcome to the show. Hello. Jack, if we rewind this, isn't that a little bit offensive of Clover to say that? Aren't they kind of calling out Strauss? Really? Strauss doesn't have love?
Right. And Horizon Organic, I'm trying to think of the brands around here that we see. That's right. How are they the only milk? I mean, the great thing about advertising claims, they're so vague as to be milk with love, like someone's cookies made with love. Like, can you prove or disprove that? They're just words. It means, to quote George Carlin talking about real chocolatey goodness. You know what that means? Nothing. It means nothing. Or he would say it's real chocolatey goodness. You know what that means? No fucking chocolate.
Someone else said people love money. I mean, they love money, but they love dairy. And, well, it's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, cheese holds pizzas together. Cheese holds lasagna together. I get it. But Miyoko in the You Are What You Eat special came on and talked about how chemically cheese actually releases euphoric chemicals. Like, you actually are being given a high from consuming it. Well, that's kind of cheating, isn't it? I mean, you're not very far away from simply taking an upper. And it's coming at the expense of these animals, all of which on this screen, nothing here is accurate. How about the clean water alone?
Thank you.
Clean water alone is a lie.
Yeah.
Animals existing in the water is a lie. I'm not kidding, ladies and gentlemen. Everything I just said is true. It's mud filled with oxygen depleting invasive plants that prevent native life from existing in those spots of water that the cows, for whatever reason, like to defecate in. The cows shit in their own water supplies.
Well, come on, Skylar, who doesn't?
Guilty.
I mean, I usually wander into ponds and then take a big morning dump right in there. I mean, come on. I mean, don't you? So
Why does this baby cow have an ice cream cone? That's sick. That's just sick.
it really is. It really is. Well, hey, it's just eating its mother's milk. But I mean, again, thank you for showing this one again and getting into it. For me, like that water is crystal clear and that stuff is muddy. If there's cows around it, by the way, the edges of these ponds get destroyed too, just like the edges of streams where these cows are allowed to graze. And again, gentle, beautiful cows, as people are writing here in the chat. It's not the cow's fault. The cows are victims, but the land is destroyed by these large, imported, exploited, for-profit, giant-sized, overbred bovines. Blight on the land.
That's once again Point Reyes National Seashore, everyone.
You recognize, man, was that your photo? I forget whose photo that is. Someone took it and I stuck the cows on there, but that's what the land actually looks like.
I think that's like up at L Ranch when you're high above looking down at McClure.
Right. Yes. Actually, Laura Cunningham gave a tour. We went with her on one of those. You've been out there anyway, but I went with her on the tour and saw this stuff. And maybe that is my picture, not yours. Anyway, that's the real thing. There's the beautiful land. That's what cows do to Point Reyes Seashore. And even in the distance background on the right, if you can see that, it's just grass, which is also not the original landscape, which is coastal prairie, destroyed, decimated 100 years ago by cows. So by the way, I do want to give a plug. Maybe I'll do the end of the show as well, coming up in 10 or 15 minutes. But this coming Saturday, March 1st at 1 o'clock in Mill Valley, there is a big celebration of a deal that Skylar, bless his heart, is, wisely skeptical of, and we'll see if it happens, and it's not over till it's over. But a deal was cut to free the elk in the park, which has already mostly kind of happened, and then to remove thousands of cows. So I am co-hosting with my Tree Spirit Project and In Defense of Animals and Ken Belay's Turtle Island Restoration Network, and I don't know, it should be 100 or more people, a lot of activists there, acknowledging what we as a community have done. And what I plan to do is, of course, harp on the fact that our work isn't over. The work has only begun, but it's a step in the right direction. So that's this coming Saturday, March 1st. And there's information on my treespiritproject.com website /events on the events page, if you're interested in attending, if you're in the Bay Area.
And Jack, as long as we're talking about upcoming events and current events, you want to just throw out a little tidbit of what has happened recently with Point Reyes and Giacomini?
Oh, well, that's the latest on that. That's the really like the sub wrinkle. So, I mean, the latest is there was a negotiated settlement and a lawsuit where they brought in a third party mediator, the Nature Conservancy, who's going to pay the ranchers a second time to not for their land. They sold that years ago. They don't own the land. And not for their leases. They don't own those either. And they don't even have the rights to a lease. They negotiate and beg and plead and flex their political muscles to get a lease. And this is paying them to stop that. Just stop trying to get a lease. So that's a successful deal, actually. And I give credit to those parties. I'm willing to play the politics of saying, look, it's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. But lo and behold, while Skylar is wise to say, look, it's not going to happen for at least a year. Let's see if it does. With the current political shenanigans that go on, attorney, ranch family, lawyer, Andrew Giacomini just filed suit, a week ago, basically trying to scuttle the deal. And the way he does that is by saying, oh, the poor ranch workers who he's never advocated before. Never, never, never. God knows they're being paid, relatively slave wages, the jobs that folks in Marin don't want and can't afford to have. Those ranchers are considered now by Giacomini to be the victims of this deal that would end the illegal, subsidized, heavily publicly subsidized ranching at Point Reyes, and these folks would be out of work. Oh, the poor ranchers. Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Don't put them out of work. Instead of actually helping them directly, he's trying to blow up the deal so the ranches don't leave. It's a real ship show. Just a real ship show. So there's a summary for you as best I can do.
Right. So Giacomini tried to block the deal in the first place. He was messing with it, and now he is interfering again by suing that the deal took place. And one thought I had was, how much power do these people have? Can anyone just like file a lawsuit and bring the government to a halt? I mean, just it seems a little too easy for him to just bring things to a halt.
To answer those questions and dig deeper into it, I would be too Joe Rogan for my own stomach to bear, which is to say I'd be speculating. I don't, there's a lot of legal answers to that stuff. And even two different lawyers, Renee Voss, God bless him, was contributing and wrote back some opinion about things and where things stand legally. But of course, in the era of Trump, if you throw money at it and throw a lawsuit at it, who knows what can happen, especially with the wild card of the federal government being run by, a scoundrel. Put it that way.
I just want people to remember, in case this does work, if Giacomini does in fact ruin this, that Giacomini will have deprived those people of around $4 million that were raised to help them. You understand? The bad guys as part of this deal, the money that was raised by the Nature Conservancy in this deal, what was it? $4 million of that went toward helping transition these farmers.
What I've heard, and again, this is informed but not absolute, to be factual here, which I try to do for you, Skylar, lest you catch me at it. But I heard the number 2.5 million. Nature Conservancy has promised, not legally binding, but said they were raising 2.5 million to help ranch families transition off the land, and that's done by the environmentalists that the ranchers badmouth, while the ranchers themselves are doing, as usual, nothing for their workers who are underpaid and exploited. And in fact, some of the ranchers are making a profit because they're getting subsidized housing from the government and then illegally subletting it to people who don't even work on the farms, but they're families of the farmers. So that whole thing which is being defended is, well, it's illegal. It's pure and simple.
Just a reminder of how much these ranchers care about their workers. The ranch hand that I interviewed was kicked off the property under the guise that they were shutting down, and that the expenses were too great because the market was demanding going organic. And this is what organic looks like, ladies and gentlemen. This is after people demand better of these ranches. This is what you get. And they did not shut down. And it was just more exploitation by these ranchers getting rid of the old workers who might start to demand a little bit too much and bringing in people who are, well, someone tell me that I'm wrong, who are in such a desperate state that they are more willing than others to be treated like complete and utter shit.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in this country when, if they, I mean, there's no uniform policy. That the people running the show, it's a clown show right now. But when they start deporting workers who work in the fields and do the menial jobs, low-paying jobs, like our great-grandparents or my great-grandparents from Europe did, came in, and one of my grandmothers was a seamstress. So doing low-paying work that nobody else is going to do in this country, that's what immigrants do. God bless us. We're a nation of immigrants. Quick question, though. I did want to ask you, Skylar, you reminded me, in your interviewing, you're the only person I know that actually did. Well, that's not true. Not the only. Now there's some more people, but you were the first anyway that I know publicly to interview some of the ranch workers on the ranches out at Point Reyes. Did you ever learn what they're being paid, what their wage is?
I did. Like, I think it came to like 15,000 a year.
Did they give you an annual figure or an hourly wage?
I think I had to calculate it into an annual figure. I have it all. I'm sorry, I'm not prepared with it. That was I did that interview a long time ago.
Whether it's for a show or not, I don't know, but I'd really like to know that information because it's going to be pertinent again. In fact, I'm giving a talk with Jim Cota and Eric Mulvar in 2 Thursdays on April 6th at the Marin Coalition in San Rafael, and I'd like to have that information because, I mean, you're one of the few that actually got that information straight from a worker. And the other thing is, do you know whether they were paying for their housing or whether they were being docked pay to pay for where they were living?
No, it was part of the deal.
Meaning we're going to let you live here and you get this wage. So it's sort of built in.
And you aren't allowed to say anything about the housing conditions.
Right. Of course. I mean, it was slumlord conditions, of course, with, rotting floorboards and leaky ceilings. I remember you're documenting that stuff.
And Joey, if he timidly brought up the fact that, hey, my kid fell through the stairs and there's moss growing on the wall and the refrigerator doesn't work, Joey Mendoza would start screaming at them and threatening to get rid of him. And so, I mean, I'm not kidding. They're talking about living with skunks and raccoons and open sewage. And that's before they go out. And remember, this is a romantic farm life. This is before they go out and steal the babies from the mothers for these loving ranchers. The ranchers don't even do it themselves. They have their exploited laborers go out and do it. They talked about it. They talked about the misbehaving mothers, the ones that actually resisted and tried to stay with their babies. And then they would listen to them screaming all day.
Wow.
And they also talked about the mastitis, how, the udders were always covered with filth and stuff like that. Yeah, that's the best, people. Best of the best.
To an aside, and then I want to come back to ask you whether those recordings can be shared, whether that worker has left the land and is no longer in jeopardy if they're, if that stuff is publicized. But that would be good for people to see or hear.
It's all it's all on YouTube.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, then it's a matter of, and speaking of which, we have a new YouTube audience member here. Thank you, Lo Ra. Whole Food writes, whole food, plant-based for the environment and health, vegan for the victims. Ask your city government to sign the plant-based treaty. Hoorah. Eco-friendly. Like napalm.
Paula said the gentlest of beasts, cows, enslaved and tortured. I mean, they really, whatever part of that is just the way that they were, and how much of it is because of the constantly being bred as a passive slave. They really are the types of creatures that you just get away with treating poorly. And this will be a future episode, but it kind of reminds me of dogs. Dogs are so forgiving. Like, I'm surrounded by just the worst dog owners. And I'm sure that those dog owners will still wag their tails or respond positively if those crappy dog owners do anything even remotely nice, or even greet the dog, or offer for the dog to step outside briefly. It's just the way it is. And then we get to feel better about ourselves. It's like, oh, look, see, the animal loves me.
Yeah. And if I may take a tonal departure, but I got into animal rights issues from the environmental aspect, not for the ethics of treating animals better. I didn't know. I was in the cultural fog and disinformation. But then once I was willing to look at my habits and the reality of, being climate crisis and all that, and like, okay, I got to quit eating animal products because they're destroying the planet. Then I could look at how the animals are treated: cows, pigs, chickens, turkeys, especially, as opposed to sheep in Europe. In this country, those animals, they are, especially like cows, it's what brought it to mind when you said what you said. Cows are these big, gentle, like pasture dogs, pasture puppies. And as you say, they're trusting, and they never fight back, and they are voiceless. They don't speak our language. So they can be endlessly abused. And they are beautiful, gentle creatures which can open our hearts. They're a gift to us on this planet. And I can get into really the sadness and the despair and the crushing depression of how we humans can be so closed down in our hearts that we treat these big, gentle, loving animals, which can make our lives qualitatively better, fill our hearts with love. And instead we do what we do to them. It's if you really take that in, it's soul crushing. It really hurts. And that's why.
Well, it makes me think about how people choose to decipher superiority. It's like, oh, well, we're in charge. We get to be able to do that. And I'm like, man, if we're superior, you'd like to think that we would hold ourselves to a higher standard instead of using that as a way out, as an excuse to be abusive.
Well, for us, being superior is to be in control and control the lives of other species, as opposed to being what you're talking about, which would be the ideal is compassionate.
Sledge says humans are animals. That's correct. A lot of people actually get upset by that. A lot of people will be mad when I say that we are animals. I'm sorry, but humans created the taxonomical chart. We are in the mammal realm. We are primates. I'm not saying that we are currently monkeys, but we do fall under primates underneath of mammals in the animal kingdom. And that I didn't do that. Animals didn't say that. That's not something offensive. That is the system that we created.
Well, so, I'm sorry to cross you, Skylar, but I got to take issue with that. I don't think it's a fair comparison to call us humans animals. Animals are innocent, sentient beings who occasionally kill to eat, in the wild anyway, but there's very few of them left. Whereas humans, as a species, as a collective, are inarguably the most destructive force on the planet, making every other species go slowly and sometimes not so slowly extinct. So to call us animals really isn't fair to animals.
Well, Karen says hell is earth for animals. And, and I was just about to say before you said that, it's hell because of us. I mean, this is a beautiful planet without us. Yeah. And yes, animals do things to each other. But once again, how quickly humans want to go and find an example that a species that we simultaneously want to say is beneath us acted in a manner that was violent to survive. And for us to turn around and say, see, look, someone else did it. And yet a wolf or a lion chasing down a gazelle and killing it doesn't hold a candle to what we do to billions of animals. It doesn't hold a candle to it. It's a dream. The way that a lion kills an animal is a dream come true compared to the way that we kill animals.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. Well, that's a lovely note to end on. If you want, I mean, it's 10:05, so we're 5 minutes past the hour. Do you want to leave it there on the kind of the big picture note, Skylar, or do you have more you want to go at? I like to keep these shows relatively short. An hour goes by very quickly here, even without guests.
Do you want to acknowledge any of the other chats? Anyone who tuned in?
Corrine Lease is agreeing. Paula, thank you for showing up again. Or as we called you, Palele Chat, is Paula. The most wasteful, destructive animals in history. That's Homo sapiens. Or as I like to say, Homo not so sapien. Or not so sapient. Yeah, well, thanks, guys, always for tuning in. Ray Cooper. He has a comment from about the Point Reyes deal. Hey, let's pay criminals to stop doing crimes. Indeed. And thank you, Sledge. Thank you guys for being regulars. Please, if you go to the YouTube video that this gets posted right when we're done here by Skylar, if you just make a quick little chat or something, it helps the almighty algorithm, as I like to call it, to get us hopefully more and newer viewers and build up this program for the animals, for the planet.
And we'll have more slides to look at in the future. Thanks, everybody. And remember to go check out treespiritproject.com to get details on the celebration coming up.
Are you going to be there, Skylar?
I will not.
You sure?
I'm not 100% sure, but I'm in hell finishing this shark film.
Yeah, I know. It would just be great to have you, even if you just pop in and say a few words. You have the microphone, my friend. It'd be great to have you give some of your fire of truth to be a voice for the voiceless in that room. So we'll talk about that. But in any case, folks, it's this coming Saturday, March 1st, 1 o'clock at the Mill Valley Community Center, 180 Camino Alto. All that's on my website, treespiritproject.com/events. Thanks, Scott.
And I want to acknowledge Sledge's comment. Yeah, almonds, our water sucks. And, California was a biodiversity hotspot. There's a reason that it is a big producer of agriculture for the United States. And that's because it was a great place to produce things. And it was producing things before humans came and decided that it was going to produce something else. It's not like Kansas, where I came from, where you could make an argument. It's like, there's not much going on here except for, Gila monsters and coyotes. This place was gorgeous. And the best we could do with it was to destroy what was here. And in between all of the cow grazing are orchards. So yes, orchards do not get off the hook. There were trees producing nuts of different kinds that we could have simply harvested. But no, we chopped everything down and decided to grow our own. And yes.
I just want to go on record here as a vegan and an activist. Almonds, alfalfa, those are the two crops that typically meat eaters push back on and say, well, you know how much water goes into those things? And I say, yeah, less than for dairy, much less than for dairy. They're not even quantifiable on the same continuum. So have your almonds and have your alfalfa. Don't grow alfalfa, which is mostly grown to feed the cows. Stop eating dairy products, stop eating beef, and don't worry about any vegetable or plant products you want to eat. It pales in comparison. And I could then go into wine, but I'll lay off wine for the moment, which is just a luxury product again, because it pales in comparison to the cruelty of dairy and beef products. Get off that stuff, folks. No matter what else you do, that's where you start.
And I ask a lot of times when people will point out imperfections in a vegan food, are you pointing that out to make an excuse to continue participating in the other bad things that you're doing? Or do you actually want to see improvement?
No, the former. I'm doing it so I don't have to change my behavior. If you're on me about me doing something bad, if I can find one little thing you're doing wrong, then I just throw us in together. Well, no one's perfect. So I don't want to deal with the fact that I'm a mass murderer. I mean, no judgment, love and light. Have a nice day, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
And on that, yes, thank you, everyone. And thank you for the kind comments in the chat. And we will see you next week.
Absolutely. We'll figure out something. It's going to be after the party. But you know what? We talk about what happened at the party that hopefully you'll be there to see yourself, because you'll have some trenchant, biting Schuyler Thomas comments to make, which I will welcome.
Okay.
Okay, folks. Bye, everyone. Thanks, Schuyler.
Bye.
Best podcast on the net from is it Corrine or Paul? I just said, oh, there, Corrine. Wow, that's sweet.